Hello friends. Today we will be discussing the relations between the two houses of the Indian Parliament. Now, in accordance to the provisions of the Constitution, there exists a bicameral legislature at the Union of India. Bicameralism means that there are two houses or two chambers in the Parliament. In case of India, they are popularly known as the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. In order to analyze the relations between the two houses of the Parliament, it is first essential for us to have a brief understanding of the system of bicameralism. This is so since without it, it will not be possible for us to have a comprehensive and critical understanding of the relation. In fact, our understanding on the relations between the two houses of the Parliament will ultimately help us to formulate an overall assessment of the Union legislature. Now, why India has adopted a system of bicameralism? What are its advantages? What are even the negative aspects of the system? These are some of the questions which are needed to be answered at the very outset. The Indian Administrative Act of 1919 has introduced the system of bicameralism in our country. Later, the Indian Administrative Act of 1935 has retained the system. Even after independence, the Parliament, following the footsteps of the British era, has established a bicameral legislature in our country. During the days when the constitution was being framed, there was hardly any discussion with regard to the limitations of the system of bicameralism. This does not mean that there was unanimity amongst the scholars with regard to the system. In fact, there were many who were against the system and went to the extent of questioning the very existence of the second chamber in the Parliament. Explaining the advantages or explaining the strengths of the second chamber, one of the members of the drafting committee, namely Mr. Gopalaswamy Iyengar, has forwarded some of the arguments. Let us examine those arguments. First of all, there is a general view that in a single chamber, law which is being made may be an outcome of a temporary emotions or excitement. But if there are two houses in the Parliament, then a law is likely to be made with sufficient consideration and carefulness. This is so since a bill which is passed in a house is presented before the second house for a thorough re-evaluation. So this procedure enables to evolve a more accurate and error-free law. Secondly, it has been argued that the members of the Council of States are elected indirectly by the people by means of proportional representation. Now, most of the members of the Council of States happen to be eminent and distinguished personalities who are renowned in their own distinctive field of knowledge. Now, these persons are unassociated or hardly had any interest so far as active politics is concerned, or they hardly wants to get involved or contest elections. Not only that, their expertise, knowledge and their experience is found to be fruitful in the formulation of the law. Thirdly, the existence of the second chamber becomes inevitable in the sense if the country has a federal structure of government. Now, by federalism, it means that there are two sets of government, one operating at the state level and the other at the union level. Now, in a federation, the system of bicameralism is essential in the sense that it basically retains the interest of the states. It is argued by many that there has to be a harmony between a national interest and the regional interest, and this is possible only if a bicameral system exists in a country. In India, the national interest is being represented by the House of the People, while the interest of the states are manifested by the Council of States. Fourthly, there is a possibility that a unicameral legislature might turn out to be a dictator in the long run. But if there are two houses in the parliament, then none of the houses can turn out to be dictator in the sense that both counter-check each other. Not only that, in doing so, they actually enhances the liberty of an individual. Fifthly, it has been pointed out that the bicameral system is found to be more fruitful in the sense that it distributes responsibilities of the states between the two houses. Sixthly, it has been pointed out that the very method of proportional representation creates an opportunity to represent the minority communities of the country. In such a way, the minority communities are not only being represented in the country, but their interests are also well preserved within the parliament. Finally, the debates and discussions that are taking place in a second chamber is likely to be rich in content, since most of the members who participate in these debates are renowned in their own distinctive fields of knowledge. And not only that, their expertise knowledge helps us in the formulation of laws. And they have their expertise knowledge also has a great educational values and therefore its importance therefore cannot be denied. Now, if there are arguments in favor of the system of bicameralism, then there are counter arguments as well, showing the limitations or the weaknesses of the system. Let us examine those arguments. First of all, it has been pointed out by Harold Lasky that legislation does not fall from a clean sky. It in fact finds a way to the statute book. This means that the laws are not made in our country by the amateurs, but the drafts of each bill are prepared by eminent lawyers of the country. The bill, before being passed into a house, is actually considered for several times, and debates and discussions on the major issues of the bills are also being followed. So, keeping in mind these arguments, it has been forwarded by many that so far as the lawmaking is concerned, the role being played by the Lok Sabha is sufficient enough, and they feel that the very existence of the second chamber is not at all required. Secondly, it has been pointed out, the second limitation of the system of bicameralism is related with the composition of the House of the Council of States. There are scholars who believe that the very composition of the Council of States is undemocratic. The members of the Council of States are elected indirectly by the people by means of proportional representation. As against it, the members of the Lok Sabha are elected directly by the people. So, the interference of the Council of States, or in other words, the interference of an undemocratic organization or an institution like that of a Council of States on the decision of a democratic institution like that of the House of the People is not only acceptable but also undesirable. Thirdly, it has been pointed out by many that one of the arguments which put forwarded by the scholars in favor of the bicameral system is that the members of the Council of State are not really, the members of the Council of States are not directly involved with active politics, and they are basically eminent personalities from their distinctive fields of knowledge. This argument is also being challenged by the many scholars. They believed that even the eminent personalities have their own political preferences. Maybe they are not directly involved into active politics or directly not a member of a particular political party, but their inclination towards the political party is there, exists to a great extent. Not only that, even the nominated members of the Council of States, who are actually being stated to be nominated by the President of India, are actually being done on the advice of the Prime Minister of India. Now, this shows that the members who are present in the Council of States are in reality being elected or nominated by the existing government of the country. Next, it has been argued that the Council of States gives a greater priority or takes into account the interest of the states. Now, there are scholars who believe that this is not entirely true, in the sense that there are certain other constitutional provisions which earmarked the domain of the union and the states. In fact, there are constitutional provisions which has in a way demarcated the area of exercising of powers of the union and the state government by incorporating three lists, namely the union list, the state list, and the concurrent list. Not only that, it has been found that the argument that the Rajya Sabha preserves the right of the state has also been challenged, in the sense that the rights of that there is also a federal court of law, namely the Supreme Court of India, which along with other functions is also entrusted with the function of safeguarding the interest of the state. Fifthly, it has been pointed out that the very principle or the very method of proportional representation is a faulty one. This is so since the method of proportional representation works in proportion to the population of the country as well as that of the state. Now, this in a way has created a division amongst the states. The bigger or densely populated states seems to have a greater say so far as the federal structure of the country is concerned as compared to the smaller states. Some scholars even went to the extent of arguing that the bigger states may alter the federal structures of the country without even taking into account the interest of the smaller states. Sixthly, it has been pointed out that the constitution, that the system of bicameralism gives an opportunity to the minority communities to be represented in the parliament. But this is also not true, since they are hardly adequately represented in the parliament. Seventhly, it has been argued that the Lok Sabha, the very existence of the Council of States or the Rajya Sabha, prevents the Lok Sabha from taking a quick decision which is required at times of emergency. Now, finally, it has been argued, and perhaps this is one of the most important logic behind the limitations of the system of bicameralism, lies in the fact that the system incurs a huge expenditure. Now, such huge expenditure, whether it is at all desirable, has been questioned by many scholars. They argue that if the work is being done by a single chamber legislature, then the very existence of the second chamber is perhaps not required. Now, based on our knowledge on the pros and cons of a bicameral system of legislature, we will now try to analyze the relation between the two houses of the Indian Parliament, namely the House of the People and the Council of States. The relation between the two houses of the Parliament can be done in three broad areas based on their exercise of powers. These three broad areas are: first of all, we will try to locate the areas in which the Lok Sabha shares equal authority with that of the Rajya Sabha. Secondly, Lok Sabha having a greater power than Rajya Sabha. And finally, we will try to analyze the constitutional provisions which grants a greater power to the Rajya Sabha as compared to that of the Lok Sabha. Now, let us examine the views, let us examine the areas in which Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha shares equal authority with each other. First of all, they shares equal authority with regards to the election of the President and the Vice President of India, with regards on matters related to removal of the judges of the Supreme Court and the High Courts of India, on matters on the removal of the chairman and the other members of the Union Public Service Commission, on matters of removal of the Chief Election Commissioner, the Controller and Auditor General, and so on. Not only that, in case of ordinary bill, including the constitutional amendments, the Lok Sabha enjoys equal authority with that of the Rajya Sabha. In case of an ordinary bill, a bill is passed into the Lok Sabha. Once it is being passed in the Lok Sabha, is presented before the Rajya Sabha, which gives its recommendations. And in case of a situation or in case of a disagreement between the two houses, the President summons a joint sitting of both the houses, in which the deadlock situation is expected to be resolved and the bill is expected to be passed by a simple majority. Apart from this, it has also been found that the annual reports of the several autonomous agencies like Union Public Service Commission, Minority Commission, Election Commission, and so on is to be presented before both the houses of the Parliament. Not only that, in case of national emergency, the Lok Sabha shares equal authority with that of Rajya Sabha in setting up of a martial law court for assessing the offences committed by the civilians and indemnifying officers for their acts done in good faith. Now let us locate the areas in which we find that Lok Sabha seems to occupy an greater position, authoritative position as compared to Rajya Sabha. First of all, Lok Sabha has a dominant position so far as the executive is concerned. Lok Sabha exercises its exclusive control over the executive. The council of members headed by the prime ministers are collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha. It is the Lok Sabha which is responsible for the formation of the Council of Ministers, its existence, and it can even demand its resignation prior to the complete tenure of 5 years if a vote of no confidence motion is passed on the floor of the House. Now, what amounts to a vote of no confidence? If Lok Sabha rejects a governmental bill or a budget, or if it disapproves an official bill, then it amounts to the expression of vote of no confidence. What will happen if a vote of no confidence is passed in the Rajya Sabha? In fact, it hardly has any effect on the government of the country. There is no doubt that the members of the Rajya Sabha has every right to get informed so far as the governmental activities are concerned, but they have no right to pass a censure motion against the government of the day. Now, in case of a money bill, Rajya Sabha has no power at all. A money bill is originated in the Lok Sabha alone. Now, a bill, whether it is to be declared as a money bill, is to be decided by the Speaker of the Lok Sabha. A money bill, once passed in the Lok Sabha, is presented before the Rajya Sabha, which has to give its assent within a period of 14 days. Now, if it gives its recommendations on a money bill, it is up to the will of the Lok Sabha whether to accept them or not. Rajya Sabha, so far as financial legislation is concerned, so it becomes absolutely clear that Rajya Sabha has hardly any role to play. Now, in case of an ordinary bill, apparently it seems that both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha shares equal authority with each other. But this does not happen in reality. In fact, in case of a disagreement between the two houses of the parliament, the president calls a joint sitting of both the houses, and the joint sitting is being presided by none other than the speaker of the Lok Sabha. Not only that, the total number of members of the Lok Sabha happens to be much more, almost double the numbers of that of the members of the total members of the Rajya Sabha. So this indicates that the decision of the Lok Sabha is to be retained even in a joint sitting where the bill is to be passed by a simple majority. Now, so far as the emergency is concerned, the proclamation of the emergency is concerned, it is said that the approval of the proclamation of emergency, both the houses shares equal authority. But the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978 has made it mandatory that if the Lok Sabha feels that the emergency provision is to be dissolved and accordingly gives advice to the President, then the President is bound to abide by its decision and declare the emergency to be dissolved. Not only that, if wanted members of the Lok Sabha request the President to call for a session to discuss on the matters of emergency, then the President is bound to summon a session in which the Speaker is also bound to give opportunity for its discussion. In these two matters, Rajya Sabha practically has no say. Now let us examine the domain where Rajya Sabha exerts a greater power as compared to that of the Lok Sabha. Now, there are certain constitutional provisions which which clearly assign certain powers to the Rajya Sabha which are not being enjoyed by the Lok Sabha. Let us examine those provisions. Under Article 249 of the state, we find that with the support of 2/3 of its members sitting and voting, the Council of States may empower the Parliament to make a law on any item included in the state list. The second exclusive power of the Council of States is connected with the setting up of an All India services. The laws related to these services are also being initiated by the Council of States. Now, the Vice President of India, by virtue of its position, is also the chairman of the Council of States. He or she presides the meetings of the Council of States. Now, so far as the bill initiated for the removal of the Vice President is to be initiated only in the Rajya Sabha alone and not in the Lok Sabha. Now, apart from the constitutional provisions which we have discussed so far, there is also an operational advantage which the Rajya Sabha might get at a critical juncture, thereby enhancing its power. Rajya Sabha is a permanent body like that of an American Senate. The members of the Rajya Sabha are elected for a period of 6 years, and after every 2 years, 1/3 of its members are re-elected. Now, this implies that it is a continuing body and is not subject to dissolution just like the Lok Sabha. The Lok Sabha is always a fresh or a new house after every 5 years general election. What is worth mentioning here is the fact that certain unprecedented changes might take place in the governmental activities if the party having a majority in the Rajya Sabha occupies the opposition bench in the Lok Sabha. Now, to conclude, one may say that Rajya Sabha or the Council of States is not as powerful as that of the American Senate, nor it is at par with that of its Australian counterpart, but it is definitely more powerful than the Canadian Senate. The Council of States having co-equal powers with that of the House of the People on several matters, particularly with regard to constitutional amendment, is a significant one. It indicates that a constitution cannot be amended until and unless Rajya Sabha agrees to it. In fact, what is important or what is required for a smooth functioning of the government is that both the houses should participate and collaborate with each other on matters of legislation, without which practically nothing could possibly be done. In fact, the bicameral system of legislature is perhaps the only viable alternative which the framers of the Constitution had, so as to ensure a harmonious coexistence between the center and the state in the overall rubric of the Union of India. Thank you.